Hello students, welcome to lesson number 17 on indicators of women's status, demographic, social, economic, educational and workforce. Now let us look at the introduction. Women over the world discovered themselves in a more marginalized and discriminatory position as human progressed from the most archaic state of hunting and gathering cultures to industrial to post-industrial, which witnessed revolutionary breakthroughs in technology. Though it varies in severity and areas of application, this phenomena of discrimination and marginalization against women exists in all civilization, spanning all levels of development and geographic boundaries. Regardless of the economic status of their various nations, women had little influence over home and societal issues, put in endless hours of laborious housework that seldom received any attention and were typically seen as inferior to males. The awareness of gender-based discrimination and the injustice meted out to women by women themselves and by the society at large and consequent movements for the advancement of women resulted in the achievement of several civil, political and legal rights for women's equality. These struggles for the emancipation of women were not confined to one part of the world. It was universal among all countries, cutting across national borders, each taking inspiration from others and benefiting from their experiences. Objectives of this lesson is, the lesson will enable the students to understand the various indicators of women's status in India. Now, the status of women in India in contemporary period. Within the Indian continent, there have been infinite variations on the status of women, diverging according to cultural milieu, family structure, class, caste, property rights and morals. However, the single point that unifies them is an identification of marginalized group. We have seen the status of Indian women in the historical periods and how it deteriorated as the time passed. Women got a subordinate position in all arenas of domestic and social life. However, there was a definite improvement of women's status in the last 1 century due to initiatives of women's activists and other international and national institutional support to enhance their status in the society. There had been various initiatives by the government of India to improve the status of women in our society. The Indian constitution special provisions to enforce equality between men and women. Besides that, there are legal provisions to maintain the gender parity and institutional support for the empowerment of women in the society. The issues of women had been taken care of in the development policies of India, and the Indian government declared the year 2001 as the year for the empowerment of women, and in the very same year the national policy for the empowerment of women was adopted. All these measures did help to some extent in the status improvement and empowerment of women in India compared to the past. But what is achieved is much less than what needs to be achieved. Indian women over the decades have proved that given the opportunity and access to strategic resources, they can enter and excel in every possible field, including those considered as the bastion of males. They have demonstrated their potential in almost every field, be it in politics or social service, administration or diplomacy, science and technology, fine arts or sports, medicine or engineering, entrepreneurships or management, or even in the unconventional fields of police and military. But the fact is that only a small proportion of total Indian female population could enjoy all these benefits of development. The vast majority of women remain deprived of it. Besides these individual and other achievement of women, when we look at the status of women as a whole in the contemporary Indian society, it cannot be denied that there is a definite achievement in certain gender related status indicators such as increased female life expectancy, decreased maternal mortality, narrowing gap between male, female, infant and child mortality, increase in the rate of female literacy, increased female workforce participation rate, increased female participation in formal and informal political process, etc. Notwithstanding all these achievements, the level of gender parity and standards of gender development indices are much less than the required level or the achievements attained by many developed and developing countries around the world. Let us briefly discuss some of the gender related status indicators to analyze the status of women in the contemporary Indian society. Now, the first one, it is a demographic and health indicator. An assessment of status of women in India can be done by examining the status indicators such as sex ratio, fertility rate, mortality rate, etc. And the first one is sex ratio and fertility. Though along with the population growth in general, the absolute number of female population has increased in India over the years, and the female sex ratio has steadily declined. In 1901, there were 972 females to per 1000 male, while this number has declined to 930 in 1971 and again to 928 in 1991. Factors such as the neglect of the girl child at an early stage leading to an higher rate of female infant mortality rate, death during childbirth, female infanticide and fetus killing, etc., largely contribute to the declining female sex ratio in India. As per 2001 census, the sex ratio of females per 1000 males was 933, which is a slight increase over the previous decade, and the sex ratio has increased from 933 females per 1000 males in 2001 to 943 females per 1000 males in 2011. The improvement in the sex ratio in 1991-2001 to 2011 is claimed to be due to the decrease in the maternal mortality rate, but there is a disturbing trend in the sex ratio of 0 to 6 age group, which has declined sharply from 945 in 1991 to 927 in 2001 and which declined to 919 in the census 2011. Both female male and girl boy sex ratio show considerable spatial and temporal variations. The highest sex ratio in both the categories is shown in the state of Kerala and most of the South Indian states, that is Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, which showed an improvement over last one decade. But many of the prosperous states such as Punjab, Maharashtra, Haryana, Gujarat show a decline in the sex ratio. It is also a matter of concern that in these states, the improvement in female literacy could not arrest the tendency of declining sex ratio. And the Registrar General of India 2001 pointed out 5 reasons for the declining sex ratio in India, and they are: first one, sex determination before birth and elimination of female births; second, changes in the sex ratio at birth; third, killing of girl children; fourth, neglect of girl children; fifth, high maternal mortality, and all the reasons pointed to the low status of women in the society. Second indicator is the life expectancy and mortality ratio. In India, life expectancy has increased for both the sexes. In 1921, life expectancy for both the sexes was 26 years. In 1994, the life expectancy for the male and female has become 61.4 and 61.1 years respectively. In 2001, the life expectancy of females recorded all-time high of 63.7, and according to 2011 census of India, the average lifespan of an Indian is 66.1 years, where the average Indian male lives for 64.6 years, while the average Indian female survives for 67.7 years. So, here women have a better life expectancy at birth due to their superior biological strength with better chance of survival at older ages. So, life expectancy in India is still not as it ought to be. It is lower than in other advanced countries owing to the prevalent social milieu which is based on patriarchy that places women on a lower status. The infant mortality rates and the child mortality ratio decline over the decades, and the gaps between the male and female infant mortality rates decline considerably. However, female child mortality rate continues to be much higher than the child mortality rate. Both the life expectancy and the infant and child mortality vary across regions. Maternal mortality rate also declined over the last one decade, but the maternal mortality rate of over 400 maternal deaths per 1 lakh live birth is acceptably high compared to 10 to 20 in developed countries. The interstate variation is seen in the case of maternal mortality rate too. So, India's performance in infant, child and maternal mortality rate are much higher in comparison to many other developing countries in the region. Indeed, the higher female infant both prenatal and natal mortality rate has been a prime cause for the declining female sex ratio in India. The gender based age specific death rate shows that women's death rate has always been higher than the males in all age group except for the age group of 50 years and above. Then the cause for death among women are mostly due to pregnancy and childbirth related reasons. And apart from that, causes for death are anemia, tuberculosis, suicide, burns, jaundice and cancer. Morbidity affects females more than males in India. In both rural and urban areas, females' morbidity rate, the rate of ailing persons per thousand population, is higher than males. Let us look at the age at marriage and fertility rate. The average age at marriage of females in India has steadily increased from 15 to around 20 over the last half a century, and the minimum age for marriage for girl as per law is 18 years. Still, large number of girls continue to get married before the age of 18 despite the legal stipulations, and this is basically due to the strong and deep rooted social pressures. Even today, almost 1 in every 5 girls get married before the age of 18, and over 50% of the girls get married between 18 to 20 years of age. So, early childbearing follows early marriages. So, early childbirth will have an impact on the lifestyle of women. This may interfere the health of the women and also the quality of life. It may reduce their access to education, training and employment and their productivity. Fertility among the Indian women has declined over the years. It has come down from over 5 in 1970 to about 3 in 2001, and the total fertility rate at national level has declined from 3 to 2.2 during 2011 census. Although the total fertility rate is better than compared to many other South Asian and African countries, it is slightly higher than the developed countries where it is around 1 to 2. Preferences for son is closely related to the fertility rate of women in India. So, health and nutrition in India within the given socio-cultural matrix, women get a very low access to medical care. Some factors like levels of earnings of the family, its educational background, attitude to marriage, values attached to the fertility of women and sex of the child, and the ideal role demanded of women by social conventions affect the women's health adversely. The nutritional status of women in India, especially that of rural women, is far from desirable. Many of them suffer from acute anemia. Early marriage and multiple pregnancies result in lack of opportunity in attaining full bodily growth for women. So, micro studies have pointed out that women do not get adequate nutrition during pregnancy and lactation. The low nutritional status of women applies to all age groups, but is more acute in the cases of young girls, pregnant and aged women. So, according to an assessment of underweight and stunt growth of children in the age group of 1 to 5 years, almost half of the girls were underweight. The dietary intake of women in the low income group is deficient by 500 to 600 calories, while in the low socio-economic groups, the low nutritional status is mainly due to poverty and the burden of family responsibilities in the lower middle income groups. It has aggravated by gender neglect and is the indirect results of stronger gender discrimination. And the problem should be viewed from the point of view that early marriage and large number of pregnancies act as a severe blockage for women's educational and economic well-being. They even stop the process of their social and economic empowerment in the longer run. Now, let us look at the educational status of women. With the recognition of the need to direct the process of social change and development towards certain desired goals, education has come to be increasingly regarded as a major instrument of social change. The Indian Constitution provides equality of opportunity to all citizens irrespective of race, sex, caste and religion, and it has also empowered the state to make specific provision for the educational well-being of women and other weaker sections of the society. However, in spite of the various commendable provisions available in the constitutions and various initiatives undertaken by the state, even after the 75 years of independence, a vast segment of the female population in India remains illiterate. Though the percentage of literacy has increased among women in India over the years from 15.34% in 1961 to 54.16% in 2001, and at the literacy rate for females and males according to 2011 census was 64.63% and 80.9% respectively. But there still exists a wide gap of 21.70 percentage points between the male-female literacy rates. Regional variation in female-male literacy level is also wide. The female literacy rates in India are greatly constrained by the dropout rates among girls, especially at the upper primary and secondary levels. The government programs such as Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Distance Primary Education Program and Operation Blackboard Shiksha Karmi Project and the National Open Schools has helped improving the educational status of women in India. But there are several structural and socio-cultural and economic factors working against the educational well-being of women in India. The traditional normative arrangements of the society, its values, beliefs, culture, institutions and the process of socialization act as barriers for the girls' enrollment and retention in the schools. The structural elements of education, namely non-availability of sufficient number of schools, rigidity of school timings, rigid admission rules, insufficient number of women teachers, etc., act as several barriers against women's education in India. Gender bias in textbooks and also among the teachers cause enormous damage to women's education. Another thing is the participation of women in economy. Women play a crucial role in all sectors of the Indian economy, and they are predominantly represented in the agriculture and unorganized sectors. And the Census of India has defined work as participation in any economically productive activity. And the rate of work participation in economically productive activity has been steadily increasing for the past several decades in both rural and urban areas. And there are various factors that affect the labor force participation of women. The extent to which the traditional patriarchal family systems and values that assign the breadwinner's role to the men and care for the household to women have been weakened. The educational achievements or attainments and skill endowments of women, rate of marriage, household size and composition, household assets and income level of unemployment, wage rate of women, absolute as well as relative to men, extent of urbanization are some of the important factors that seem to have an effect on the work participation rates of women. And it has been shown in the census that at an all India level, the percentage of workers both male and females to the total population as 39.26%, and according to 2011 census, the workforce participation rate at all India levels is 25.51% for females and 53.26% for males. Significantly, the percentage for the male worker was 53.26% as against the female workers is 25.51%. There has been a decadal increase in the female workforce participation rate, and the increase was mainly due to the increase in the marginal workers. The high incidence of marginal workers among the female working population is mostly because of non-recognition of work undertaken by women as economic activity and their regular participation in the so-called economic activities. The low level of work participation of women does not mean that only around 1/4 of women in India are engaged in economically productive jobs. To the contrary, there are studies which shows that though female work participation in economically productive activities as defined by the National Account System is low, her total hours of work are not less than the total time of work by male. Through one of the studies, it has been proved that 60 to 70% of women's time spent on the working for the family's well-being is not counted in the national accounts, and most of the work that women do go unrecognized. 3 reasons have been identified why women's work goes under enumerated. First one is there is the seasonal, intermittent and uncertain nature of work and the mix up of domestic and economic work. Second reason is the underreporting of women's economic activities due to low esteem given to the manual work outside home. Third, it is a belief among women itself that their work is not important enough to be reported. Therefore, women's participation in organized labor market is very low. Out of the total women in the workforce as per the 2001 census report, only 4.2% are engaged in organized sector. But in according to 2011 census, women workers constituted 20.5% of total employment in organized sector in the country. Still it is very low when it is compared to male population, and several reasons are cited for the low rate of women's participation in the organized sector. That is, low access to education and training, employers' negative attitude towards the women employees, poor working conditions, gender role expectations and self-image of women. Let us look at the another indicator for the women's status, that is women and political participation. Participation in adult franchise or participation in the decision making process of the formal bodies of the state are some of the ways of effectively participating in the decision making process, what we shall be calling political participation. The opportunity of both high profile and ordinary women of India to take part in the independence movement brought them closer to the political process of the country. Independent India witnessed impressive participation of women in the election and in related activities. This is reflected in the voter turnout of women during elections as well as the number of women in the legislatures. Moreover, the 73rd and 74th amendment of the Constitution provided 33% of women in the local elected bodies. However, The number of women in the highest elected bodies of legislature, which actually give them the opportunity of participating in decision making processes and power shaping, had never been more than 10%. The stiff opposition to the proposal of reserving 33% of seats for women in the legislatures at the national and state level shows the reservation of the larger society in accepting and promoting gender equality in the society. To summarize, this lesson has attempted to provide an overview of the position of women in modern society, both globally and nationally. Since the turn of the century, there have been commendable purposeful efforts made at the national levels to elevate women's place in society. In recognition of the disadvantaged and inferior position, there has been widespread acceptance of the fact that gender equality and status advancement in society are essential for its overall growth, particularly with regard to the eradication of poverty. The International Conference on Women's Rights in Vienna in 1992 recognized women's rights as human rights, which was a significant victory for women's rights. Despite the fact that all of these efforts and initiatives did contribute to raising women's status in society, it is still far from ideal when compared to the progress made by the entire society and the benefits enjoyed by males. Here it is demonstrated that women's status, as measured by several common status indicators, lags far behind men's, whether in terms of demographic and health indicators or in terms of educational, economic or other social indicators. It is undeniable that women's standing varies from society to society. And as we have shown, we have looked at women globally, those in industrialized nations generally have been status than those in emerging and least developed nations across a wide range of standard status indicators. However, women's status in comparison to men is by no means equal, particularly on the fronts of decision making and power sharing. In general, we may state that women in today's society must work for gender parity and must accomplish far more than they have thus far.